How's it going, YouTube? I hope it's going well for you wherever and whenever you're at. I'm not even sure what day it is. I think it's Thursday. Might be Wednesday. I don't know. I should know. I don't know. I think it's Thursday. Whatever. Anyway, what am I yammering about today? Well, first and foremost, the Democratic National Convention is happening in Chicago, and I am nowhere near Chicago for the moment, which is good, but I'll be heading through Chicago-ish this afternoon on my way to my delivery, so, you know, I'll be near the mess, but just not in it, which is fine. And I live near there, so, you know, it's just another day at the office, more or less, going through Chicago. Anyway, what in the world am I yammering about today? So, to do with the Democratic National Convention. Well, before the DNC kicked off, Vice President Harris came out and said that she was going to try to go about implementing price controls if elected. It's like, okay, well, we all know that that's basically going to be absolutely terrible, because in a free market economy, if you're going to fix prices on everything, that's only going to play to the hands of the people who have everything, and for everybody else, red lines. At least depending on which set of memes or histrionic rage posting you read. But anyway, the idea of price controls, to me, as a mostly uneducated on the subject truck driver, is that it's a good idea on paper, but a terrible idea in practice. And again, to my uneducated assessment, here's why. If a bottle of soda, again, let's just take this 20-ounce bottle of Orange Mountain Dew, okay? Right now, those average about $2.25 to $2.50 per bottle, depending on where you get it. If you're going to get it from a gas station or a truck stop, it's going to be $2.65, $2.75, somewhere in that range. If you get it from a grocery store, it might be down around $2.25 to $2.55, again, depending on where you're getting it from. Okay, so let's assume $2.50 just for a good number, all right? $2.50 per bottle. Now, 20 years ago, that same bottle was $1.25. Now, to me, there's no reason that 20-ounce bottle of Mountain Dew should be anything more than $1.50. But it's $2.50, so there we are. Anyway, so in that $2.50, you've got everything that went into making that bottle of Mountain Dew appear in my hand. So you have the initial production and harvesting of whatever natural materials went into this. You know, you had to filter the water. We had to collect the water, you had to filter the water. You had to generate the sugar, whether it was from high fructose corn syrup or whatever. There's material in here that had to be produced. Some of it was grown before it ended up in this bottle. The rest of it was engineered in a lab somewhere, or in a production plant, or whatever the case may be. So you've got the initial production cost, you've got the final production cost, you've got the transportation of all the materials to the final production point, and then you have the transportation of the finished product to the distribution center, and then you have the transportation of that finished product to the point of sale, and then you have the employee at that point of sale who stocked it. So you have to pay for all of that in that $2.50. So let's say, for example, just for funsies, Vice President Harris, potentially President Harris, comes out and says that bottle of soda, that can only be $1.75. It cannot be anything more than $1.75. And it can only be $1.75 for, let's say, 2 years, just for fun. The price cannot change up on this product for 2 years. Okay, 75 cents of that bottle is now gone. That cannot be generated as revenue for any facet of the chain of custody of that product, whether from the final disposition in my hand, you know, final form, all the way back to its original component production parts, okay? The ripple effect of all of that is going to result in layoffs of line workers or, grocery stock folks, because now the money that the point of sale generates from that small little profit margin, that's now gone. And then, which means that now they don't have as much liquid revenue, so they can't afford to pay as many people or give them necessary raises to cover their cost of living, so they're gone. Or they're not going anywhere upwards in terms of their earning potential. And then going back further, now it's more expensive for the distribution center to order that product because they have to pay transportation costs. And fuel's not going down because we're only talking about goods for point of sale, not necessities like fuel. So now that margin's gone, so that means the warehouse can't order as much product, so now that product starts becoming more and more scarce because it can't be ordered because there's no profit in ordering that product. All right? And then now the production company doesn't produce as much because it's not going to have enough profit margin for them to produce it because there's no market to consume it, because the people who would consume it don't have the option to purchase it because the distribution warehouse and the transportation folks didn't bring it to market. And so since there's no demand for it, the product gets cut or reduced, and then which in turn causes a reduction in demand for the component products that went into that final product, which in turn leads to more layoffs, reductions in production, and everything else all the way back through the line, which also leads to less freight in the trucking market, which means less work for guys like me and also even guys at mega carriers. So you have this ripple effect all the way back through, and the net result is you have product scarcity and lower profit margins and just money in general for everyone through the chain. That's what price control does, at least to my assessment. Now, I could be right on the money, or I could be completely wrong. I'm not sure which, because again, I am not going to sit here and say I know the score. I'm just making my own judgment based off of a handful of memes, some history that I know, and my own assessment of how everything works. Because in logistics, I know that there is a cost to bring me to a location to receive freight, and then there is a cost for me to transport that freight that must be recouped somehow in the act of transportation of that freight. When I deliver that freight, I get paid for delivering the freight, and the people on both sides of that coin, the shipper and the receiver, have to account for the cost of me operating into their pricing for how they do all of their business, okay? And right now it's a good time for them because there's still a glut of trucks in the market, so the rates are still going to be pretty low. Anyway, if that was not the case, if there are fewer trucks, rates would be a little bit higher, and then that would in turn lead to different calculations, as we know, in other aspects of the business, okay? So that's why price control is terrible. But since I'm talking about unworkable ideas, let's talk about an unworkable idea that I think would benefit the average American worker and consumer and family. Workers, consumers, families. They're usually all three the same person, but we're going to look at them in three different aspects here, okay? So we've got the workers, consumers, families. This is my unworkable idea to supplant the notion of price controls. So, the companies that are deliberately price gouging, all right, that are overcharging for their products in order to generate a larger profit margin for themselves, first of all, you figure out who they are, whether it's food producers, whether that's, energy, whoever. And then you tell them, okay, you want to have these prices be this high in order to have this much profit margin, or to maximize it and then make everyone pay prices they really can't afford, we're going to tax you. So right now the corporate tax rate in the U.S., courtesy of Donald Trump, is I think 21%, and the Harris campaign is touting or pitching a 28% corporate tax. I'm going to go a little bit further. For any company found to be deliberately price gouging, including healthcare and big pharma and energy, big oil, deliberately price gouging will now carry a mandatory corporate tax of 45% on all revenue before any deductions can be accounted for. So 45% of all revenue for a given year will now be subject to taxation before any write-offs of, charity or whatever else. Any of the tax shelters the corporations have, okay? 45% taxed. Unless those same companies reduce their prices voluntarily. Then they can stay at 21%. Otherwise, the tax rate more than doubles for them for that year as a penalty for price gouging. Also, so that benefits the consumers, person number 2, because now prices have to come down or those corporations lose a ton of their revenue before they can really turn a profit. So then they end up going into a loss, and they can't write off that loss because this is anything taxation on all revenue, so they're paying that tax whether they like it or not, at least in my mind. Again, this is an unworkable idea. I'm just putting this out there as another stupid idea that won't get anywhere because of lobbying and everything else, and also because of the potential significant damage it could do to the economy. But here's how it would benefit the workers in my idea. So, a favorite tactic of corporations when things are getting bumpy is layoffs, right sizing, streamlining, things of that, those buzzwords, that you hear corporations mention in all of their statements and press releases where they say, we're going to lay off a bunch of folks that we really probably shouldn't because it's going to complicate work for everybody else, but we want to trim payroll because we view our employees as a cost as opposed to an investment. But we can't say that because we'll get in trouble. And reducing costs is another favorite buzzword as well, right? So, before any corporation can lay off more than, let's say, 2% of their workforce in a given fiscal or calendar year, whichever is going to be more advantageous for their employees, any corporation seeking to reduce more than 2% of their staff in a given calendar year, meaning they can, if it's a company of 10,000 people, 2% of 10,000, that's what, 200, give or take? I think that's right. So if a corporation 10,000 wants to lay off 200 people, and they can only do 200 people scot-free in the course of a calendar year, all right? If they want to lay off 1,000 people, that corporation has to make comparable cuts in high-level management, and there also has to be a payroll or bonus or stock option or some sort of profit sharing penalty to the board of directors. There has to be a penalty financially to the board of directors, and there can be no salary or hourly rate of pay increases for any members of the board or upper management for 2 years. So they want to lay off more than, 2% of their workforce, they have to accept the penalty of they don't get more money that year, they don't get bonuses that year, and they don't get a raise for 2 years. Again, unworkable ideas, but they sound pretty awesome on paper, don't they? Stick it to the rich guys at the very top. Yeah, that sounds amazing. We know it won't work, but it would benefit the workers, person number 1, because now they're going to have better job security, at least in theory, because those same corporations that would use layoffs as a tactic to ensure that the company profit margins stay green enough that those board members get their bonuses every year or every quarter or whatever it is, they have to weigh, okay, if I want to get paid I can't lay anybody off in order to make myself more money. But the downside is that would likely lead to the job market being significantly more competitive, and jobs in a lot of companies would be much harder to come by because the layoffs and the turnover, the churn just wouldn't be there, all right? And that's a possible downside. So that's, on paper, benefit to the worker, person number one. But how does all of this benefit person number three, the American family? Well, if you've got more stability for the workers and you've got better prices for the consumers, in theory, in my mind here, that means the American family potentially could get back to a world where one income takes care of the wage earner, the person at home, and any children. Okay? Again, this is all pipe dreaming on paper because why not? But that's how things used to be. And I think, in my mind, we're going to be better off if we can get back to an era or get back to a method where one income takes care of a family. Right now, that only works if you live in farming communities where you don't need much that you have to go out and buy because there's an incentive to generate your own produce. You know, you garden, you do these things because you have the land to do it, and you're also living somewhere where your cost of living is significantly reduced. So people in the urban environments, metropolitan areas, suburbia, it's, as far as I can tell, it is essentially impossible to have the ideal or the idea of the ideal quality of life on only one income. That's just a fact of life as I understand it. Now, is it possible? Yes. But the onus is now on one of the two people in that relationship or that family as the heads of the household in order to make that work. And that person, the pressure on them to earn is much higher. Whereas a two-income family now has a greater degree of flexibility, which is the unfortunate reality we've all been conditioned to accept. And quite honestly, you know, being a single fellow business owner, I know almost to a fact of life as well that any potential future wife that I end up marrying, she's going to have a career, and in some capacity, she's probably going to end up having invested far and away more in her mind into her career than I have into my business. So the onus is going to be on me to be flexible so that she can have her career. And that's fine, because if she's earning huge money, you know, and I can be flexible, only truck if I need to or if I have to, and then I can be home with the kids. I mean, how is that not an amazing idea? You know, I don't mind being a house husband. I'll cook, I'll clean, I don't care. Things get rough, I'll go trucking, it'll be fine. But that's just where we're at now. And, you know, these ideas look good on paper until you run the numbers on them and realize that somehow, some way, someone's going to get screwed, and it's never going to be the people at the top. It's always going to be you and me. We're always going to be the ones who get the shaft somehow, some way, because someone's going to find a loophole, or the lobbyists are going to torpedo it, or whatever. So, but price controls suck, except on paper. My ideas suck in the reality, probably, but on paper they look amazing because all it does is shaft the corporations, and, you know, it shafts the guys on top. But on the other hand, there's going to be a lot of businesses that suddenly find themselves far and away more restricted, and they'll end up not being able to be in business, which in turn will tighten the markets in certain industries, which will have ripple effects through the economy, which in turn will probably end up putting more power in the hands of corporations. Any way you slice it, there is no good way out of the current situations that we're in, and it's more than one. Anyway, thank you so much for watching my diatribe YouTube. I really do appreciate it. I will see you down the road.